so he can, he's working hard, he's lifting weights, and he can't wait for basketball season to get back. So when we play a team up in North County or somewhere like that, he can get back for George Floyd. And it shocked the mother to where she broke down. And the dad was shocked because he's never heard his son talk violently, or, he's not that type of kid. He was raised well. And it started making me think that, what other kids are thinking the same thing. And then I started seeing a lot of my kids and other kids in Southeast and front lines of protests. Coach Bass talked about a couple last week. You know what I'm saying? These kids are in the midst of it. You know what I'm saying? La Mesa, downtown, I was seeing our kids, being involved in it. So my thing was like, maybe it's time for us as coaches to sit down and discuss how we can come together first, and then have our kids come together second, and to discuss that, because I don't want to be on the end of a basketball game that comes into a brawl because of racism, or our kids thinking one thing or the other. And I've been around long enough to know that, I've been on Zoom calls throughout the country with different coaches and hearing different forums speak. And, the one thing they keep going back is, what are we saying as coaches? What are we saying to our kids? What are we saying to our players? How are we keeping our players, one, united? And how, if you're white, what are you saying to black players? What are black players saying to white players? How are we, as coaches, going to keep the game, football, basketball, any sport, pure, where it stays sports, it doesn't turn into something else? So I started having these Zoom conversations to have. The first one we had, Mike Hop from Saints, who, is a high-profile coach in San Diego. Ryan Meyer, who won CIF at La Jolla Country Day. So you start getting different people's aspects and picking their brain and some very good information about, maybe some people didn't understand what happens in different communities. You know what I'm saying? And then we let some kids come on and talk about how they feel of being student athletes at schools like San Diego High, Lincoln High School. And I'm hoping tonight one of the parents comes on whose friends was friends. Her son was friends with a kid he went to school with, probably since the 5th, 6th grade. And make a long story short, they're not friends no more. They're teammates at the same high school, but they're not friends no more behind what happened with George Floyd. But my thing before is most of y'all know me. We've been here before. You know what I'm saying? I say that all the time. We've been here before. It's nothing new. We've been here with, Trayvon Martin. We've been here with Tamir Rice, and it's been back to business as usual. We put hoodies on, or they say what we say, and sports resume. And I don't think this time sports can't resume as natural. I get the COVID virus. I tell people we got 2 viruses we're dealing with. We're dealing with the COVID-19 virus, and we're dealing with racism virus. And some people don't like to talk about it. It's uncomfortable. Like I said, I appreciate, Mike Hop and Ryan Meyer and everybody coming on and talking about it, because at least if we start talking about it, we can figure out that is a problem. And like I told Mike, I told a lot of people, I don't look to the professionals to handle this, because it's about their money. I don't look to collegiate to handle this because it's about their scholarship. If it's going to change, it's going to change from grassroots, and grassroots is the kids that we coach, the kids that we mentor. So with that said, I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Jeff, thank you. And for those of you that may not know Jeff and are on here for the first time, Jeff is also past recipient of the YMCA of San Diego County Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Human Dignity Award. And I think we can see why. This is not the first thing he's done to address critical issues. He's been the founder and has run the Blacktop Classic, Increase the Peace, Stop the Violence every fall before school begins, invites all the high school basketball coaches and the top players in the area who ended up, Jeff, being some of the top #1 player in the country this past year. Mobley's son, I see too, so he's been in this game for a long time, and I'm just honored to be a part of this call. And we've had 4 great calls, in my opinion. The conversations have been huge. This has gone beyond just boys basketball. We got coaches of other sports on here now. We got parents on here now. I've got my son on here now. I've got one of my former players, Jamie, on the call right now from Flagstaff, Arizona, and so many. But as Jeff mentioned, there's been a whole lot of things happening recently. And like he said, the NBA is going to the bubble, and they're trying to do their thing to honor the movement and continue the conversation in their own area right now. And we also saw too, collegiately, University of Texas is renaming their football stadium for Ricky Williams and Earl Campbell, but they're not changing their theme song, which is The Eyes of Texas. So there's still some controversy that's been going on there. A lot of these conversations, and then locally, San Diego State, everything's shifting right now to, are we going to play games, and the significance of that. And then locally here, fall sports for high school. And then the articles, still no word. Monday's going to be the word. Maybe Scott, you can help us, give us some more information about what we think we're going to hear. And then I saw this article today in the paper from a high school coach who said, let the families decide. And so when Jeff and I kind of teed this conversation off for this week, he said exactly what he mentioned earlier. Right now there's two viruses. There's COVID and there's racism. And so is COVID going to let this racism thing slip away? And will these conversations still continue? Because I think we all agree there's a whole lot more work that needs to be done. So with that being said, last week we did talk about the young ladies in sports, and Vanessa Lemon, who's on the call right now, got in touch with us throughout the week to say that she would like to keep that conversation alive in a little more detail than we did last time. Unfortunately, I don't see any of the athletes on right now, but Vanessa, we're going to turn it over to you right now. We'll get it started. And I'm glad, Jamie, that you're on the call too, because I think this is going to be something you can speak right to as well. So Vanessa, take it away.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the intro. Thank you for being here, everybody, tonight. And, just like Mr. Brunker said last week, the topic of our Black women in sports, our young Black girls in sports, our Black and brown girls in sports. I don't think Coach George is on the call now, or if he is, great. And he brought up the topic just asking a question. And his question was, how are we talking to our young Black girls about these things? And I was really excited that he brought it up, because that was the kind of first mention of, like, maybe we're going to dive into this aspect. And then his take was, coming from giving advice to our young ladies as bystanders to these incidents, this situation, this narrative. And it's imperative that we understand that our young Black ladies have so much of this narrative. And I was really excited to speak for tons of reasons. I'm super passionate about it, obviously. And just the idea of finding solutions and, recreating that narrative. We have to understand that, yes, our Black and brown young ladies, they face all the same things. It's just not as publicized, or you don't see it as, death by officer, blasted all over TV, unless it's Sandra Bland, Breonna Taylor, and even how those narratives just play out. Just the voice of Black women are never heard, And then when we discuss going into our young ladies, our Black girls in schools, in cities across the country, are anywhere from 2 times to 6 times more likely to be disciplined and suspended for infractions at school. And I think those are really, really important pieces that we cannot forget. And, the young women that we see, body cams of the summer pool party, the young lady getting whipped and thrown, kneed in the back for a party that was too loud. The young lady that had her head slammed into the ground in Brooklyn, and then her friend tried to help her, and the police officer then proceeded to shoot. this other young lady out the storefront window. I mean, and these are teenage girls going through these same things. So when we talk about our schools and us as academic and educational and youth leaders and sports and things like that, we just have to be consistent and understand that, sure, we might be giving different levels of advice, or the methods might be different, whereas with our young ladies, we might have to take more of the listening role and come at them more in education and based in facts, right? Or I think that's where the play is. Does the narrative stop, and are these conversations really that different? No, I don't think so. And just a resource that I recently found that I think would really be good for everybody to take a look at. It's a documentary recently debuted by Monique Morris, and it's called The Push Out. It's criminalization of Black girls in schools. And all of these things are part of this larger picture that we're trying to fix. So, just as I just really wanted to put that out there, and if any of you coaches have anything, maybe you want to ask. In high schools, I coached 10 years girls, but AAU, club levels, things like that. So I would say my expertise leans towards, my young ladies, and being as though I was one. And I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, where we didn't have these conversations. As a mixed girl, I was still the Black athlete with the white mom. Things come with that. And our young ladies, there's that emotional component. I mean, I show it now. And we just have, I think that, yes, when we're talking about this and when we're including our Black and brown young ladies, just we're taken to that emotional point, right? And understand that maybe your strong, stern way of approach isn't what they really need in the moment. Give them the same advice, tell them to be observant of their surroundings, and, to, be as cordial as possible in any situations with police. I just, yeah, how the topic was presented, and just kind of the idea that, our young ladies don't also face those same adversities in our system, whether at school or out in the public. That's definitely something that we all need to make sure that we see and are aware of, because, that we are all part of this narrative. So that's it.
Vanessa, thank you and what I really appreciate about what you've done here is you talked about it throughout the week. You came prepared to talk about this topic, and this is very apparent and personal to you, and we can see that. I don't want to let this go, and I know we have a couple others that can speak to the topic, otherwise I'm going to call on you. So who'd like to begin?
Well, I'll say a couple things. Like, I love listening to what the ladies have to say on the subject, because I think the first step in this whole thing is education. I found with my boys, even when discussing the issues facing them as Black men, a lot of it has to do with the educational piece, just informing the group of boys about the facts of the matter and the reality of the situation. Because if some of the boys subscribe to like a ball is life mentality, maybe they may not be as versed on social justice issues and things of that sort. I think being obsessed and being single-minded is kind of celebrated in this community that we're in, the Mamba mentality and all that good stuff, which is good. It's necessary for success, but it's also important to have a wider angle at what goes on. And I really appreciate people like LeBron and Dwayne Wade and folks like that to to help the boys understand that. But as it relates to issues facing young Black and brown or inner city or disadvantaged women in general, I think us as primarily male basketball coaches and our players have to listen more and be educated. The way I do things, it's just the way I do things, but first education, then empowerment, and then you look to achieve some things out of that. But I think when I bring up the subject with my group of boys, you know, it's not always initially like accepted easily. What I did this year is I hired a female JV head coach as my JV head coach, and it cleaned up a lot of the locker room behavior of the boys, you know, just by putting somebody in the room, you know, where you can't be misogynistic and you can't be dismissive and you have to understand their perspective. That education in itself, just by her being a Black woman in the room, allowed the boys to examine themselves in some ways. And so it's hard for me to get off of the starting block of education when it comes to all this, whether it's Black players talking to white players, whether it's Black men talking to Black women. Wherever there's ignorance, you can't get anywhere. So I'm curious to see what other ideas coaches and these women have to educate and expose our young men to different realities that might allow them to, you know, react in a different way about some of these current events.
Thanks, Coach. Jamie, you ready to add to this yet? As a player, as a coach, you're muted right now. Okay.
Yeah, you know, I stopped coaching about 5 years ago, so I feel I don't have the same experiences that you all have coaching young people right now in this time. I wish I did. I wish I had more experience to share right now. But I feel like, just as a former player, it's such a unique experience to be part of this family, because, right, your teammates become your family. And so it's really like this multi-racial, multi-religion family that you become part of, and you get to know your teammates in a way that is, you probably won't even get to know like your closest friends. The things that you go through together, right? The sweat, the tears, the celebrations. I just don't think it could be replicated in other relationships, in my experience. And so I feel like if we start to share or allow our players or allow our young people and adults to start sharing your experiences with each other, so your experience becomes my experience and my experience becomes your experience, and you begin to understand what this person has gone through. You know, obviously, Vanessa, your experience could be completely different than someone who has 2 Black parents, or obviously 2 white parents. And it's kind of like your childhood and what you've gone through and experienced might be really new to one of your teammates who's never experienced that, or, you know, or your players. So I mean, sharing your stories with your players, because I think when you're young, it's hard. What we're able to now wrap our heads around and understand, I don't think I could have understood that when I was 16 or 15. So even just sharing your own experiences as a coach with your players, at least gets them to start thinking, maybe, you know, more comfortable to opening up. But I just think the more we could talk with one another and explain what our experiences have been, so you can almost feel what I have been feeling and I can feel what you've been feeling.
So Jamie, as a player at Poway and University of San Francisco, and in your coaching days, you did coach, especially in college as well. Did you see racism as a female athlete anywhere throughout those years? Locally, in college, what did that look like to you?
No, but I'm not Black, so maybe, and I missed it, right? I experienced, I'm a Middle Eastern Jewish woman who's the daughter of an immigrant, a brown-skinned immigrant. And so I did experience anti-Semitism. But I felt like you were just so accepted well, I'm gotta be honest, at Poway, I didn't play with any Black players, but with playing for you in our club team, it was a super mixed team. And I just felt like you got to know one another as family, as sisters. And that just I felt like that trumped skin color, race. But again, as a non-Black woman, I'm sure a lot of my teammates who are Black did feel that.
Elizabeth Tate, are you available to speak right now? I see your screen, but I don't see you. So if you don't know Liz is the AAU track and field chairperson for San Diego and Imperial counties, and she's got a great story to tell. But Debbie Stinson, you're a Black female official. How'd that go for you?
It was very challenging in the beginning when I first started. I wasn't as respected as most of the males in our association, whether Black or white or brown. It took years for me to gain that respect. And as the years passed and I started to become well known, and I started to communicate, how I felt about certain things and the way I was being treated at that particular time, I started to gain more respect. And so as a Black woman, it is difficult to break the mold, if you will, sometimes, because that's what most, especially when you're talking about basketball, any sporting event that is dominated pretty much by men. When you see a woman come on the scene, it's automatically, okay, well, why is she here? I did have an assigner at one time say that they would never assign a Black woman to one of the MLK tournament games that was being hosted by Lincoln. And they said, if you ever tell, I would never admit to it. And so I never said anything, but it was just the fact that it was said to me. So I know that, this prejudice or sexism, whatever you want to call it, it exists, not just with Black people in general, but it also exists with Black women and women in general as well.
Thank you. And what we're going to do too is, if you'd like to speak, just put your name into the chat box, and that's how the order we will go in on a go-forward basis. So just add it in there right now. Vanessa just did post that documentary in the chat, and thank you for asking, Jonathan. That's good stuff. And anyone else want to talk more about this topic? Because this is a good one. And I'll tell you one thing, is a parent of 5 children and 3 daughters, it kind of helps your perspective when you do have some daughters. I know, Marty, you probably attest to that with your soccer playing daughters right now who are out there practicing as we speak. But and Jeff's got a daughter, and it just gives you a different perspective. I know after coaching men for so long, when I first started coaching my daughter and then Jamie's team, and I mean, that was different. It was absolutely different. There's no doubt about it. But I know that there were some great learnings there, and we had great times as well. Tracy Sunland, I know you're on the call right now. Wake up now, because Tracy is anybody in track and field. That's Tracy. So Tracy, what can you tell us about the females that you have worked with throughout your years in track and field? And does racism exist at that level?
I think the question, does racism exist at that level, would be my perception that racism exists at all levels. Mm-hmm. The question is, and I'm a white guy. Yes, I'm Jewish, but my great-grandfather's sister changed our name from Zundalevich to Sundland one Tuesday night. And everybody thought I was Swedish for 40 years. So whites, we don't see except the really obvious stuff. And one of my dear friends for many years was Ed Temple, who's the coach at Tennessee State, and the stories that would exist of taking his team around the country, they just turn your stomach. They make your blood boil. And you just say, how the hell can anybody treat people like that? How can they live that way? Wilma Rudolph was an iconic athlete. But to my mind, perhaps the greatest thing that she did was she called out the city of Nashville after she won her 3 gold medals. And they wanted to give her a ticker tape parade, but they wanted to do it in the black part of town out near Tennessee State. And she said, this is downtown, and this is a citywide integrated celebration. It was the first one that ever existed in Tennessee. You hear, as a white coach, yeah, they all tell you stories. I remember taking one of my young ladies who I became guardian for, and we moved here to San Diego many, many years ago. A girl named Janice Weiser, now Janice Pope, won the first state 100 and 200 championships as a member of the Wilkes Wonder Women in La Jolla Track Club, but she ran for La Jolla High School. And if I'd forced her to do her best event, the quarter, she would have won the state championship by herself that first year. But we were driving in Virginia. We were from DC, driving in Virginia down to see my dad. And shoot, we got pulled over for speeding. The problem was my car couldn't go fast enough, and they wanted us to follow them to the pokey. They insisted we were going too slow. I said, you make the car go this fast. In the end, being naive, my dad said, yeah, she's black and we're driving in the Plains, Virginia. What do you expect, idiot? But I think for us, white folks, it's the passive, not visible racism that we have to keep remembering, and we now have to fight, and we have to, 2/3 of the people on this call, they grow up in a different world. They're told they have to tell their kids things that I didn't have to tell my daughter about how to drive. And that's the most scary part of this whole thing. And I'm just going on like a blithering idiot, but it's the thing that scares me the most about what has transpired over the last 3.5 years. Feelings that some of us thought had gone away or were just an incredibly small little fringe, have been licensed by this president and by the behavior that exists and validated. And I thought going into the last election that we had a much bigger problem than I ever imagined, that 30% of the people were off their rockers and were homophobic, racist, xenophobic, and the number is much greater. And we got to find a way to stem that. And
that's why we're here tonight. And we appreciate you being here. Appreciate your comments. Yeah, definitely do. Jeff, you had a comment.
I'm sorry, keep going on. Thank you.
No, I mean, I just, like Mike said, I got daughters, and as Tracy said, it is a different conversation. Like Coach Bass says, it's a different conversation. I had this conversation with Ryan Meyer. The very first Zoom is conversation we have with our kids is totally different than probably conversation coaches have north of 8. And it's not about, when my kids leave my gym, it's okay, dealing with not just the police, but you dealing with gang problems. You dealing with kids got to walk through gang infested neighborhoods. You dealing with, the drug situation. So when somebody asks me, have I talked to my kids like through the pandemic? I'm like, yeah, I talk to my kids every day on Zoom calls, because it's more. I lost 2 brothers to gang violence. Both of my brothers was murdered. 92 and 93. Both of them got killed. Through gang crime. Older one was involved, young one had nothing to do with it. But so as coaches, I think sometimes, what I'm saying, it becomes a win-win. Like, I don't think, and even Ryan said, man, at Country Day, I didn't have that conversation. At the practice, we say 1, 2, 3 team and go home. Now, Ryan, great coach he is, he's at Mount McGill. And he even said it, it's a different conversation is going to happen now. So it's definitely, and some people think it's all about, even in the association, the referee association, it's, what I'm saying, I invited North County Association on this call. What I'm saying? I don't know if they picked up, what I'm saying, because I like to know what they're talking about. How will it be dealt with? How are you really going to balance what's going on in America, and even in our own backyards, even our cities? Sometimes we forget that things happen in our own cities. We look at what happened in Minneapolis, but we're not looking what happens in San Diego. So I think, just like, I definitely back Bass, and, what I'm saying, and he's in the same situation that I am, and probably Carl Fisher at Morris and Hoover coaches and Crawford coaches. And I'm not saying maybe, coaches, one coach told me on a Zoom call, he don't coach black athletes, he don't have that problem.
Oh my God.
So I took it like, okay, I mean, it was a national call, and at least I knew where you stand now. I mean, if that's how he thinks, how many other people think like that? But you can coach the black athletes, you can coach these kids to win championships and hang up banners. But now we're in a crucial time where you need to sit down and talk about it and put sports secondary, or maybe even third dairy. Maybe it's not a priority like it used to be. Maybe, what I'm saying, some of these kids need to talk to each other. What I'm saying? And that's what I definitely want my kids to be able to talk to a kid at La Jolla, or a kid at Torrey Pines, or a kid at whatever, Carlsbad, and talk, because it has to, like my son, like my son does not want to drive. I got my son a car for graduation. He does not want to drive. And the conversation with him is, make sure you got your license, make sure you got your registration. The conversation I have with my sons and my black athletes and my Hispanic athletes is probably a little different conversation than other people have with their kids when they drive it. Because I got to tell my son, when you get pulled over, if you do get pulled over, don't panic. Even if you get arrested, just we'll bail you out. We'll handle it. But he don't want to drive. Brand new car, he don't want to drive. And he hasn't left the house. You know what I'm saying? I know we in the pandemic, but he hasn't drove his car. He don't want to drive his car. And even though you tell him it's all right, just do what, I'm saying, do what they tell you to do. At the end of the day, some people did do what the police told them to do, and they still died. That's all I got.
Well,
So Jeff, so we got some folks lined up in the chat room, and I'm going to call on them in a minute. Here's the lineup so far: Jerry Holmes, Mike Stutz, and then Lonnie. Real quick, because Jeff brought up a great point when he talked about earlier about the two pandemics that we have out there right now: there's social justice and COVID. And I wanted to take this opportunity to show something that I picked up this week, and I'm going to share it right here. So I'm a member of the San Diego State President's Enrollment Management Advisory Committee, and they hand out some pretty amazing statistics every meeting, and this was the agenda. But in this PowerPoint presentation, it talks a lot about enrollment, about who's coming to San Diego State, the numbers. I mean, just mind-blowing. They could break it down by where they're coming from over the years comparatively, what the enrollment looks like. But one of the things that really intrigued me with this report right here is this piece here, where it talked about the impact of COVID on the, not the fallout, look, as we come down here. So, okay, here it is, racial inequalities of COVID. And if you didn't know, you can see the cases per 10,000 people, who's the highest, and by age and race. And I can, if you're interested in this, I could get this PowerPoint to you. But then look at this right here. Research shows following months during the virus disruptions, in terms of the overall, in K through 12 students, the learning loss that happens in Black and Hispanic students. and it gives it. And here's where it was really impactful: learning loss based on race, and you can see where Black and Hispanic and low income stands in all of this, and the impact on K-12 students. And so, if there was ever a time to talk to your students and to talk to your families, it's now. And there's a number of things you can talk about. But what I'd like to do is we've got right now 3 in line: Jerry, Mike, and Lonnie. But at some point, coaches and parents or whoever's on the call, tell us what you're talking to your kids about. I mean, are you talking to them at all? Are you connecting with them? Are you communicating with them? But especially on these topics of what Vanessa talked about, what Jeff's talked about, and what I just showed you right now. Is anybody talking about these things with their athletes? All right. Jerry Holmes, you're up first, followed by Mike Stutz, and then Lonnie.
That scan one time, not for the surgery, but one time before that.
Somebody talking?
Yes. Okay, Jerry.
Okay. Hey, thank you guys for inviting
Right
me. Jeff, thank you, Debbie. And I'm glad to see these officials here, you know, as president of the San Diego County Basketball Officials Association. And I'm happy to be here. One of the things, something that Tracy said, you know, racism do exist on all levels, you know, not just with women, you know, not just with whites, but it also exists in Blacks, you know, with Blacks as well. However, with that being said, I've had to experience racism, you know, refereeing basketball, and in my professional field, you know, when I was in law enforcement for 24 years, you know, and I experienced it, you know. When I worked in law enforcement, you know, I used to speak to the kids about racism. I used to tell the kids my lifetime experience growing up in the neighborhood that I grew up in and how things took place, how we was treated as, you know, whites come and treat us, or white police officers deal with Black individuals, you know, differently from the way they deal with white individuals. So a lot of my experience I share with these kids, and I talk about that a lot, you know, in the classroom with these kids. But one of the things that I can say is very important, one of the things that I think Vanessa mentioned is education. And we got to think about what is being taught in the home. What are the parents are teaching? And we as coaches, referees, we can teach, we can say, you know, everything that we need to say on the court, but what is being taught at home? Because at some houses, some homes, they're being taught to hate other race, you know, and I've had opportunities to speak to individuals as a law enforcement officer, you know, and they say, hey, my mom taught me, my dad taught me to hate Blacks, or my dad taught me to hate Latinos. So I think the education piece is important, especially in the homes and what the parents are teaching their kids. As an official, you know, I had the opportunity to experience it working a basketball game. And it's funny because when I was working in New Orleans, I had an official, and white official that I worked with, and it was 2 good teams. It was a CYO tournament, championship game, a Black school playing a white school. And this white official, I mean, blatantly just killed that team with fouls. I mean, fouls that wasn't even there. It was so bad till the association got involved. A week later, the coaches filed a complaint, and the association got involved. They did an investigation. This referee got banned from refereeing. Not only did he get banned, but he actually got arrested, you know, for what he did. So, you know, we got to be mindful of it, and it's pretty interesting, and it's out there, and racism is a big deal, and education is the key to it. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Jerry. Next up, Mike Stutz.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I just want to add on to Vanessa and thank Vanessa for bringing the topic up. My stepdaughter, who I've been with since she's 2, is Puerto Rican. She grew up over in East Dago, most 95% of her life till she went to college. Then we moved. My sons all played at Balboa, Pop Warner. She swam at Colina del Sol. Well, she went to high school at Patrick Henry High School, and she was a tremendous water polo player who wasn't from the feeder schools. I'm sorry, I live over by Henry now, of all things. She wasn't from the feeder schools. You know, she went to to the middle school, but she didn't go to the elementary schools. And when she came in as a freshman and she earned a starting job in that polo program, she experienced levels of prejudice, racism from the board members at Patrick Henry who pressured the coach. So I just want to reiterate that it happens to all the ladies of color as well. And thank you for sharing that. And it even happened, to my daughter directly, where it cost her playing time, and she was embarrassed and ashamed because where she lived, it was like, why are they holding it against me? Colina del Sol pool is as good as Allied Garden pool, and so we experienced a little there. I want to add one more thing, Michael. As you know, I'm a teacher. I've done my whole career in education, and I've been tweeting a lot lately the last, I want to say couple days, directly about distance learning. I'm in the grind every day right now. I'm a special educator. So if you know anything about special education, prevalence is African American and Hispanic, primarily males, more males than females. Teaching every day in the grind, the hardest part has been getting the parents involved for multiple reasons, right? I came from a single mom who worked 2 jobs where we had to babysit since we were 10. So I know that side. For whatever the reasons, parents seem to some parents want to say they don't know. I don't know how to log on. I don't know how to check my child putting in the time to the distance learning. And that's our biggest hurdle, as somebody mentioned earlier. I even reached out to the San Diego Unified and said, we need to have a parent communication plan started today to have every parent online. Most parents have phones these days. You have all the translation ability for multi-language. If distance learning is going to be effective, especially in the areas of lower socioeconomic, as you mentioned, Michael, as the stats showed for San Diego State, that we have to have the parents online, and that's got to be a focus to prevent those numbers from getting worse in those areas. So I just wanted to add that, and I'm a big part, hopefully be a big part of developing a plan if they reach out to me. And I talk to my players. I talk to my players all the time. I talk to at least 1 or 2 players a day. As we occasionally I'll see them outside somewhere, and we'll meet outside, and we definitely are talking about it, as I mentioned last time, and we're researching things to educate ourselves, as everybody's been talking about. So we're doing our best.
Mike, I appreciate your comments, and this distance learning is going to be interesting. I know many of you went through it this past semester, but now knowing it's going to be the entire fall semester, are you ready for it? Are you students ready for it? One of the telltale stats in those slides I just showed you was the number of students who never logged on. They didn't log on. They know how to log on, but for whatever reason, they didn't log on. And I think that's I'm sure your players all logged on, right? You all know if they did or didn't, but I think as coaches and advocates for these student athletes right now, if you took care of your kids right there, that would be pretty cool. That'd be a good thing to make sure they're ready. And we're going to talk more about the impact of this too, especially as it relates to the recruitability of an athlete and all that a little later in the call. But next up, we've got Lonnie on right now. Lonnie Jones, you still? Okay.
Yep, I'm here, Brunker. Hey, first off, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 4th Zoom meeting. Thanks, Jeff, for putting it on again. My thing is, we keep talking about stories and things like that. Solutions is what we need. Is what we really got to get, and brainstorming. So a couple things that I'm going to start doing with my program, and not just my program, because I impact kids that are not my players. I'm not the average staff member, never have been. I've always, made myself available for any and all students, regardless if you're an athlete or not. And I don't know, I just pride myself on just, being an outlet for our kids on our campuses. So a couple things. As a young coach, I was brought up under some people, and I'm guilty of trying to push kids to big colleges and things like that, and getting caught up in the name. And at the end of the day, what coaches and trainers and us don't look at is financial hardships of some of our kids that get all these loans and debt and everything like that. I got a kid that she really wants to be a Division I basketball player, but at the end of the day, she can have a great career at the NAIA level, D2 level, things like that, and save money. So things that I'm gonna start doing moving forward is pushing our kids culturally towards more HBCUs. I myself did go to Langston University for a year in Oklahoma. It was definitely a good experience. Coming out of Lincoln High School, what is that? Coming out of Lincoln High School, when you hear Lincoln, fair to say everybody thinks it's the black high school of San Diego. That's old times. Now it's not. Working on campus, it's fair to say Lincoln has lost its culture overall. We definitely, for what I've seen from the artwork on the walls to teachers' classrooms, is definitely more Hispanic pride, which I don't have an issue with because you're supposed to be proud of who you are and your culture and things like that. But one of the things that I'm going to do is, attempt to have a great meeting with our admin, who's very open, and trying to bring back the culture for the Black student of Lincoln, to bring that back. Because again, I mean, you just don't see it at the Hive like you used to. Only time I see the Black culture, honestly, is at the sporting events, and we're bigger than athletes. All of us are. So for me, I just want to push the HBCUs. I want to push law enforcement. I have a friend that I actually grew up with that is a San Diego PD. Played at Sarah High School, was a great basketball player and baseball player. He's on campus a lot, but with him, I want to be able to push more police officers, law enforcement. I want to get our kids a little more comfortable instead of, immediately just, we got to fear things. And I want to just create a better culture for, closer to home, because that's what I can impact now. I personally can impact Lincoln High School and the Southeast community. So I want to take the next couple months to build something back there, to be more powerful, to push kids going to, there's nothing wrong with going to smaller colleges that are more affordable, instead of having these, this debt for years to come. I get San Diego State, I get all that, but at the end of the day, are they really in our community, doing what they should do? UCSD and all that, I get it. But there's nothing wrong with going to Howard. There's nothing wrong with going to Langston. It's actually some really good talent. When I was at Langston, we had a guy that got drafted, a receiver that got drafted to the Minnesota Vikings. So, I mean, there's some really good talent and great ball to be played. And I'm just, touching on that. I'm proud of Mikey Williams for pushing that movement a couple weeks back, basically convinced Maker to go to Howard. I mean, so the movement is real, and we just got to get our culture back, our kids informed. So again, for me, I'm gonna get my kids more involved in applying for HBCUs, knowing their heritage, showing them the history of Lincoln all over again. And I'm also, because of my former gang ties, I'm also gonna I'm gonna work with some of the OGs in the community to get them back on campus and to tell their stories on, what not to do, how to survive, how to deal with the police. And things like that. So again, I just want to get our kids more cultured. I'm gonna do my best to get to get the kids I deal with more off social media, and instead of using their phone for social media, use it for education. And I'm also going to attempt to start assignments for my kids. Like, who is this person? And just in practice, quiz them. Ask them a question in a workout and see if they did it. Just try to get them more educated about who they are, where they come from, and just trying to get Lincoln back to the old Lincoln that stood so strong for so many years. Those are my goals and some of the solutions that I'm going to attempt to do. And if anybody has anything to touch on that, please, hit me in the comments or email or call me. I'm open for any and everything to help our students be great. And I am a girls head coach, but again, I impact male athletes, male students, and regular kids as well. So if you have anything that can help me impact these kids more, I'd appreciate it.
Great comments, Lonnie, and especially the comments about the HBCUs and how to get there. And let's not forget, too, in San Diego, we're blessed to have some great community colleges here as well. The first 2 years, you're going to take nothing but GEs anyway, and you talk about inexpensive. And 2 of our 5 kids went, or actually 3 of our 5 went to community colleges, and my 2 sons were able to play at the next level in football once they got out of Grossmont as well. So there's different paths for everybody, and you're right, the financial burdens are huge. But as we talk about this distance learning, like Mike mentioned earlier, Mike Stutz, he talked about the difficulties that we're having right now is to getting them academically ready for the next level. And coaches, you can help in those areas. Next up is Reed
Mike.
Scott. Yes.
Mike, real fast, Mike. Of my 5 seniors that are leaving, what is it? 2 of them, Jetty Hughes is playing at Maricosta, which is a JC. Maria Flores wanted to go to Grossmont so she could be close to home and help her mom.
That's right.
Imani James is at San Diego State, and Regina Littleton is at San Marcos. I think with the girls, and I've coached both. I was at Hoover with boys, San Diego High with boys, San Diego High with girls. I think that with girls, I am blessed as far as academics go. They're a little more focused than our fellas are. Overall, that is. But, again, we just got to keep pushing the movement on, college is college. And you're right, the 2-year school, there's nothing wrong with that, with the free education for 2 years now in California. So all 5 of our seniors are going – well, I'm sorry, the 5th senior is not going to school. She's going to the U.S. Navy. So, again, there's different avenues for our kids, and we just got to explore all of them.
And so I think I heard you say, Lonnie, that how many of them are playing at the next level?
Right now, it's 3 of the 5.
3 of the 5, but there's 5 that are going, and that isn't that what we should all be doing? Regardless if they get play or if they play another game of basketball, football, whatever their game is, if you coached them all that time, shouldn't you be shepherding them all the way through graduation from college? That would be a great concept. Reed Scott, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you. Thursday is good. I just want to say that, I definitely pray for people's souls, that's for sure. Me and my wife had a long discussion over how do people think they can get into heaven if they judge somebody out their skin color. Last week or week before last, Josh Dupree, one of my guys, he asked the question is, how do we change, these issues if we don't change what is being taught in the home? And man, I've struggled with that for the last couple of weeks. In 2008, I was in the Army Sergeant's Major Academy, and President Obama was getting ready to be sworn in, and half our class stood up and walked out of the classroom, and it made me sick to my stomach that all the future E9s in the Army, half of them stand up and walk out just because they don't want to hear President Obama speak. And and a lot of them will probably try to say, well, it's because he was, I don't think it had anything to do with it. I don't mean to bring politics into it. I'm just saying it's hard for me to understand. It's hard for me to understand why you wouldn't judge somebody off their character and not off their skin color. And I'll say before I shut up is, Jeff, man, I really appreciate you putting this together. Man, and I appreciate the people on there that's keeping this conversation going. I also would be remiss not to say that through this, Jeff, I've met Vanessa Lemon, who invited me out, and I walked for Breonna Taylor. I will say that my wife put me on quarantine for 14 days, and I've got 4 days left of that, and that's why I'm been back. But it led to Coach Lemon now. She's going to be part of our staff. And, I told her we don't have assistants. We only have coaches. So I'm so excited. She's going to be part of our team. So, Jeff, do not try to twist arm. You already got about 8 coaches over at Lincoln already. So I don't think a 9th, you'll be employed like we're going to be able to. But just want to thank you all. I think it's Ray's birthday. God bless you. You're an awesome guy, or it was yesterday. But I appreciate everybody. Thank you.
Let's all congratulate Vanessa right now, man. Clap it up for her. That's a good job. And Reed, thank you for making that move. And see what happens when you come to this chat. That's good stuff. Okay, once again, if you want to speak, put your name in the chat room. And I see Elizabeth Tate looking at her screen right now. You got to put that screen down a little bit so we can see you, Liz. But I want to introduce Elizabeth Tate. And if you don't know her, she's going to tell you a little bit about her background in sports. And we talked about this morning when she called me. You're on mute right now, Liz. Legendary. Can you get it off? Okay. She's trying to figure it out. So once again, if you want to speak, put your name in the chat room as we get the wait list going right now. Jonathan Pierce will be up after Vanette. Is Elizabeth on yet? Liz, you know to unmute yourself? Okay, you're good. Liz, speak to us. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Come on, girl. Come on now.
Okay, well, hello, everyone. Thank you for sending out the emails and inviting me. And right now with everyone, you know, cultural competency is a very important matter for all of us to consider. How do we interact with each other? And there's so much literature and so many trainings out there for those who do not know. You have to think about, for me, and then for the literature that's out there, and the research is very important to embrace everything with the open mind. You have to want to be present. You have to want to be there. And I was listening to the other gentleman talking about his daughter who learned to swim at Kalina and then went over to Patrick Henry. You know, sometimes they have to be willing to want others in their presence in order for them to be accepted and acknowledged. And that's clear across the board with everything from sports to business to social services to big multinational corporations. Everyone is trying to figure out, how do I become culturally literate? What is cultural competency and how can you test it? How can you prove it? And it's just boiled down to the basics of being kind and considerate to others. And if you don't know something, ask the question without being indignant and rude. I don't know, there's a whole spiel on how to do it. But for me, I've learned as a small child, watching, after the Watts riot, watching police officers go through the community and in the 60s, you know, just pulling people up, jacking them, searching them, frisking them, and myself and other girls in the communities would write down the numbers and walk down 103rd Street to the police station and file a complaint. Didn't do anything. The 60s was still the 60s. They still killed Dr. Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy. But just for me, those thoughts and those experiences have been embedded in me. So it's always important that I always be a role model or someone on the front line, or just my face always in protest, because if you do something, I'm gonna say something. And it don't always have to be confrontational. You can just pull them to the side quietly and say, hey, what was that all about? Or you can confront them. It all depends. But sometimes you have to stand up. If you don't say something, you're gonna walk around with that guilt. If you do say something, okay, now you're an ally of the victim. The perpetrators see the relationships being formed. I know for myself in sports, you know, growing up in sports as a child and competing and watching everyone else go around me go on to the next level of competition was exciting, because I decided I didn't want to do it. Not only because Title IX became involved and it was great, but it's only so many ribbons and trophies you can win. And to me, that wasn't exciting. I wanted to go on into politics. I wanted to go on into psychology. And so I went that route. And, you know, 100 years ago, Women's Suffrage Act was still fighting for the same things we're fighting for today. And even in women's sports, I can say, 20 years ago, as a starter, I was a starter. More than 20 years ago, it's 25, maybe 28 years ago. And I was a part of the Starters Association. And for me, I said, okay, so San Diego State has an all-girls women's team. I mean, all women's team, all girls, whatever. And why can't I start there? I'm starting all the high school meets, all the schools with the 390 meter tracks, like over at Coronado, or going far out away from where I'm at. So I didn't mind because I figured, okay, this is part of the process. Whatever your assignment is, you do it. So when I began to ask the question, I went, why can't I start over at San Diego State? Oh no, you have to be a starter for 5 years. Okay, I'm a starter for 5 years. Well, it's 7 years. It's 10 years. So it got to the point because they kept raising the bar to push me out, but it did not stop me from asking the question, how can I be a starter at San Diego State? And so I asked Arnie Robinson, my dearest friend, hey, so he raised the question. They said, well, no, it's based upon seniority and only the other starters get it. I'm like, well, wait a minute. If it's only all girls out there, I call them girls, but they're young ladies, out there running, why can't they see a woman starting a track meet? Oh my God, you thought I had hit all the guys in the room upside the head. So what it boiled down to was the fact that Arnie made a phone call to the school and the school obliged, and they no longer went through the Starters Association to get starters, and he went through the women and the other starters that he knew personally. So that created a big rift in the Starters Association and the officials. And I didn't know it was a whole big rift between the red coats and the blue coats, and that's a whole nother story. But it was, and you think that even in officiating that everything is equitable, and it is not. We could talk about equality in race, and then when you look at it in gender, it's a whole different story. As a woman, just going out there wanting to officiate and do something, you have to fight. And back then, well, a starter, you got paid minimum fees, but as an official, it was a volunteer position, but there was still times when it was inequitable. And I'm just wondering, like, okay, we've come a little bit farther, but how much further do we have to go? And at the time, the CIF chairperson, of the woman that was there, I can't even recall her name, she suggested, why don't you start a whole new Starters Association? And I thought about it, but at the time that was just too much work. I was into other things. I was just not on my agenda. But I see so many things that are unfair. But most importantly, to do absolutely nothing is not the way to go. Sometimes you have to call them out right then and there. And you can be nice about it. But to do nothing, you're going to carry that guilt. And sometimes you don't have to be out there protesting, carrying signs. We need someone in the meeting rooms, someone on the telephone. There are other avenues. Utilize your strengths, identify your strengths so that you can know where you can be the most useful. And for me, sometimes I find myself in the meetings, sometimes making speeches, organizing, as opposed to out there saying things that are not unfair. Because there's a place for all of us, but to sit back and say nothing in sports, in school, in the community, in society is doing yourself no good, because sooner or later, someone you love, your child, your grandchild, an in-law, they're going to be impacted. And had you spoke up at the time, there may have been a rule or a change to accommodate them with fairness. So I don't know so much to be said, but I've been involved in a lot of things, and I just see the unfairness, but I have a voice.
And you do have a voice, and we appreciate you speaking tonight, Liz. And I put a link in the chat room. If you don't know who Elizabeth Tate is, I wrote an article about her in the Union Tribune. Someone San Diego should know, and she's so modest and humble. But when you read her background and her history, we're honored to have you here tonight. So Liz, we appreciate you being here. Next up is Jonathan Pierce, followed by Ricardo. Remember, if you want to say something, put your name in the chat room and I'll get you up next. Jonathan, you ready?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. And Liz, thank you for sharing right there. That was a lot of great stuff. And what really stuck with me is, being, always speaking up and saying something. I've always been a pretty passive. And I'm realizing now more than ever that this is not something I can talk about. I have to use my voice a little bit more. Especially in regards to, the topic of our conversation today, in regards to racism and injustice, but really about everything in life, kind of the whole idea of if you don't stand for something, stand for nothing. And so thank you for sharing that. And that's something that, struck a chord with me. Lonnie a minute ago was also talking about, turning these stories into solutions. And a lot of the stories that we've had in the past couple meetings have dealt with instances of whether it be racial comments in a game or racial situations and slurs being yelled from fans or slurs being yelled or exchanged between players. And my question is, and maybe Scott could touch on this one, at whether it's district level, conference level, CIF level, what do we have in place now, or what could we put in place as far as repercussions, whether that be something like a punishment or suspension for students that make these comments or players that make these comments, or on the side of more of like restorative justice, being that education is key. We've already identified that, when these incidents do occur, mandating some sort of restorative justice education, I don't want class or something, but what can be done, and can we get a uniform policy in regards to those incidents? So more of a
Scott.
question than have
Well,
an
that's
answer.
what I didn't. Yeah,
Okay.
John, you want me to
Okay.
answer? I didn't want to speak out of turn. So right now, all those kind of items you're talking about, Jonathan, they all rest at a site level. Sites still have the ability to issue out whatever they feel is appropriate and necessary. There's obviously the CIF pillars, and even when you violate the CIF pillars, CIF is going to have their say, but what you're talking about is not going to fall under that. It's usually going to result right back to the site level. Just as, like, I'll use our conference. We're in a conference with our 16 high schools, but there's Cathedral, Saints, Coronado, OLP, Christian. We create a big umbrella, and then the individual sites or districts close that umbrella and make it. So I think what you're talking about would be more at a district level, in regards to, if you're looking for a policy, it would be more at a district level that you're looking at.
Thank you for that, Scott. And I think what some people had expressed as a concern is when it's handled at the site level is sometimes it slips through the cracks, or the site doesn't see an issue with it. And so I'm wondering if there's a way that we could, possibly move to change that or make it more uniform across the county. And it's something that's not in place right now, but what could we do to change that? So
if you're looking for a CIF rule, what it takes is a proposal from, like for our conference, for example, city conference. It takes an athletic director to bring a proposal to city conference, and then if city conference approves it, it would go to athletic council, and if they approve it, it would get submitted to CIF for their bylaws too. So there is a process of going, and what you're talking about is somebody, if let's say you mentioned a slur. Okay, are you talking about if a player or a fan? How are you going to identify that? And then I think when you say it slips through the cracks, I think the struggle is always, if I'm at a certain school, their VPs investigate it thoroughly. They'll call in 35 people to get an answer. You're at some other schools, they've got a bunch of things going on. They're going to spend 2 minutes on it, say I didn't get anything. And there's that inequity that happens at that point as well. So I think those would be things that if an AD was going to bring it forward, they would have to have those kind of things addressed in that manner.
Cool. And then as a collective group right here, like Coach Lonnie said, we're about solutions. So maybe as a collective group, that could be something we put on our, plate to make a proposal like that. And try to move forward with it, because I think that's come up as a common problem in these discussions the past couple times. So thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Jonathan, and thanks, Scott. And Scott, before we hear from Ricardo right now, can you give us an update on what we're probably going to hear on Monday? What's your thoughts right now?
You're probably going to hear that sports aren't going to start anytime soon at the high school level. It's going to be a ways. It is definitely a ways off. it will not be any time in the near future for high school athletics to be coming back, would be my best guess of what you're going to hear on Monday. So I did talk to Jeff earlier today, and we were talking about some things. And if high school sports weren't going to open, what does that slow the progress of what we're trying to, or what you're trying to accomplish with this group? Like, what are some things that we can do if we're not going to be back with our students anytime soon, if we're not going to be playing at high school athletics anytime soon, how do we not lose momentum of something that this group would like to accomplish? I really think that's got to be outlined or dialed in more by this group, because my biggest fear, honestly, and I shared with Jeff today, is that momentum gets lost. Like that there's, especially when school starts back up and there's no athletics and everybody gets into a mode, and then all of a sudden athletics is going to hit like that. And at that point, I'm afraid it's, as Jeff told me, we're back to the same kind of things. We've missed an opportunity, and I don't think we want to miss that opportunity. So I do think we need to be aware of that. I don't think high school athletics is going to start anytime soon.
Is there a possibility it won't start at all this year?
I don't believe so. I definitely think high school athletics are going to happen. I think it's going to be different, and I think kids are going to have to make choices about what sports or athletics they're going to have to play. I think people are going to be shocked with what they hear about on Monday when the state CIF releases their information. But here's another thing. Everybody seems to think what the state releases, state CIF is going to release on Monday, is the end all. It's not. Whatever state releases does not mean that's what San Diego is going to do. And if San Diego CIF says, hey, this is what the state did, but this is what we're going to do, it still doesn't even mean San Diego Unified, using our own district as an example, is going to participate. Because I can tell you right now, if school's not in session, if we're online, there is no chance we're going to have athletics in San Diego Unified. So if we're all online, we're not going to put people back on campus when we can't put them in school. So I just think that you'll see a trickle down, and that's why I don't think it's going to be close. But I think there's going to be some interesting questions that people have after Monday's. State's going to release it at 9 a.m. on Monday.
Speaking of what you and Jeff talked about earlier, to keep the momentum going, and I know this group's going to keep going. I've already had private messages, talking about how people want to continue to come back, and I know we have a lot of repeaters right here. We can continue growing this. But Scott, are there people like you in positions in other districts that are athletic directors of, Sweetwater School District or Poway School District, or whatever it is? And what can we do to bring this to them if they're not already doing it themselves?
So I think the question, Michael, is what is this? So I guess that would be the question. Yeah, there's a me in most of the large district. There's a me in Grossmont. There's a me in Sweetwater. John Labita is now kind of heading up North County, kind of a thing. But what is it? When Jeff and I talked about the number one priority, I thought, and Jeff could speak more to this if you want, was we got to get the kids to talk. We got to have the kids have conversations. So to me, that was a goal after the conversation that I had with Jeff, like, okay, that's something he and I have to revisit. But is that going to be harder to do? Does it not have the same impact if we have to Zoom it as opposed to waiting a few months and having it in person? But the goal was we got to start to have students that have lived it be able to talk to each other and share those experiences.
Good point. Good point. So, and you'd be willing to help connect us with those appropriate people then?
Yeah, I have no problem. Yeah.
Yep. And how many school districts are there running sports?
Well, when you say how many school districts, there's major conferences. There's over, 10, 15 districts. Okay. But some districts are small, a few schools. Ours obviously is 16 high schools. San Diego Unified, so to speak, district-wise is the big dog with the amount of schools we have. But North County obviously has a lot. They're just broken up into smaller districts.
Beautiful. Okay, we appreciate you, Scott, and thank you for being here tonight. Ricardo, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. And so this is my first time joining the call, and I love like the dialogue and all the information that I'm hearing. And I just wanted to speak briefly. I got invited by my former coach, Coach Stutz. So I thank him for that. And I used to play basketball for him in high school. So it's just like we were speaking about racism earlier. And I think it really stems from actually like going to school. I think that's the first place where you kind of learn racism indirectly. Whether it be like learning the history of what took place in the U.S. And it's kind of like, you know, being a Black male, just being raised in that environment of like just going to a regular U.S. school, you don't learn much about your culture. And so it took me going to college, going away, which I recommend for a lot of kids to do, is go away from San Diego, go out of state. So I went to New Mexico State, where I was able to kind of get a sense of self and kind of learn who I truly was. So I learned a lot of things, and I'm grateful for that opportunity, as well as just the simple fact of educating myself on just my history as a Black man. I think that's very important, because if you don't know your past, it's hard to kind of tell your future. And I just didn't realize as well when I was younger how much influence I had over my peers. And it's kind of like that dialogue I have now to kind of steer them in the right direction and kind of just have those uncomfortable conversations when it comes to racism, police brutality. I was raised by a single mom, so it was always that fear factor. Respect the police, don't do this and do that. And I think that could be dangerous in a way when you're speaking to that. As I believe somebody mentioned before, it's not to be fearful, but to be prepared and kind of just know your surroundings and be very just empathetic to the matter. I think perspective is great. If we have more perspective, we'll have more empathy, and with more empathy comes that understanding and the solution finding. So I just wanted to give my 2 cents when it came to that, just briefly.
You gave more than 2 cents. That was $1 million answer right there, and we appreciate you coming there. And Coach Stutz, thank you for inviting your player, your former player, to come tonight. And I would hope too, and Scott, just so that you know, this might be the first of the 4 calls we've had that we haven't had student athletes on for whatever reason. So we've usually had many voices on here, and they've been outstanding. The recording from the second one you should listen to, because it was you'll hear a lot of their voices right there. So that's good stuff. Hey, listen, I don't have anybody in the chat room right now to get started, but I'm going to call on somebody right now, because Lonnie earlier talked about HBCUs, and I'm looking at a screenshot here with Clark Atlanta University. Chantil, is that you? Are you on right now? Is she there? Or is she just, because I'd like her to tell us a little bit about her experience, because she often talks about the historical Black colleges and the one she went to. So she's not on. Okay, she's not coming to us. Who'd like to open it up? And I think right now, let's talk a little bit more about what Scott mentioned earlier. You know, when school doesn't come back, as we know it, and these conversations need to continue. And how are you going to do it, coaches? And what's your connectivity right now? Can you give us some tips on what's going on on your team and what you're working on today?
I'll speak on that a little bit right now, but I kind of want to ask, because like I said last week, I think our primary role in these kids' lives are educators. In a lot of ways, by being involved with the sports, they'll listen to us more than they would a teacher at school, sometimes more than they would a parent. The kind of family that we breed, we really have these kids' attention. And I was on another call with regional coaches, and they had some suggestions on how to educate. So certain books to settle on, certain documentaries, because if we're not going to be in practice like we normally would be, if we're not going to be doing conditioning like we normally would be, even though we could do some things distance-wise, does anybody have recommendations aside from the push out that we got today that we can really settle on, so we can all speak the same language? Recommended books that are kind of getting popular right now from you know, how to be an anti-racist and things of that sort. Books speaking to different causes that we can recommend, or documentaries, which is kind of easier for kids to digest, because education first. We have to be on the same page, speaking the same language, recognizing the same problems, seeing the same opportunities, and then move forward from there. So I'm willing to hear any suggestions as far as that goes from you guys.
Okay, that's a good question to ask. And one other question that Jeff would like to have answered too, and we talked about it a little bit before everybody got on. Jeff, why don't you ask the question, because you framed it quite well.
Well, that question, I had talked to Scott earlier, and we were just chit-chatting, and the question that came up, what do coaches call their Black athletes? Do they say Black athletes? Do they say African-American athletes? And me and Scott got into detailed conversation about it, and you know, and it was, to me, it was a good question. I think we call them, you know, me and Pierce talked, you know, we call them by their names, you know, but I think what we was referring to was when you're dealing with the media, when you're dealing with, you know what I'm saying, somebody coming talking to you to interview you and say, well, how many, you know, what's your makeup of your team? And do you say, I got 7 Black players, 8 white players, or, you know, I got, you know, and I told Scott, you know what I'm saying, from my experience with my kids, some of our kids, I don't think, some of my kids look at it different. Like, I had a debate with one of my players. I said, you know, I used the word African-American, and his comment was like, man, I ain't from Africa. I'm from Southeast. I'm Black. So, you know, I think that's another conversation with our kids. Like, as coaches, like, I'm going to sit down with mine and, you know what I'm saying, like, hey, fellas, you know, and again, that goes back to what Coach Bass said about history and Ricardo about what your history. You know, and again, I think these kids are paying attention a little bit more, and I think they are reading up on history, and there's, you know, on Black history. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, one of my kids asked the question: well, is it Black history or is it African American history? You know, that's another debatable question. And so, you know, I would just like to know around the panel, man, what as coaches, what would you know what I'm saying? I know we call them young men and young women. We call them like they are kids. We call them like our kids. But if you are in that situation where media hits you or you're getting interviewed and they ask you, what's the makeup of your team? You know, what do you say? How do you respond? You know, do you call white kids Caucasian and Hispanics, Latinos and Hispanics? And, you know, so that was the discussion we was having earlier.
That's a great question. And with that question right now, Chantil's back on, and Chantil has that HBCU experience and can probably tell us about what that kind of meant there. And what do you like to be called?
Hi, sorry for missing you the first time.
Yes.
So I am a native of San Diego, grew up a little bit in Southeast, and my family moved to the East Lake area right before I started high school. So I ended up attending East Lake High School. While I was at Lemon Grove Middle School, I did a project, basically an AVID class, about interest in kind of correlating your interest with research of schools. And at the time, I was very much interested in mass media, journalism, and that's when I found out about Clark Atlanta University. So that was at the age of 12. From there, I knew that that's where I would go. I ended up not majoring in journalism. I ended up getting my degree in political science. And of course, at the time when I left, we did a tour probably the April, and then I was gone that summer, of course, for school. So that was the first time I'd ever been in Atlanta, first time I'd been in the state of Georgia. But the HBCU experience is like no other. And I think that it is still very much needed. One thing that I can say is that, you know, when we talk about the UC system and the Cal State system and some of the other schools that are PWIs, or predominantly white institutions, excuse me, we always have that mold, I guess you could say, of structure and where the kids have to fit. Every now and again, you might get those students that fall out of that GPA range that are still able to go there. One thing about HBCUs is, although there are students of all calibers that attend HBCUs, our admissions requirements are generally a 2.5. So, and some schools are even a little bit lower than that. So it's kind of like those students that maybe had a hard time during high school, but still deserve a chance. HBCUs will give your students those chances where other places, especially if we're not talking athletics, will say, no, you can't, you know, you won't be admitted into our school. So that's one thing about HBCUs that I definitely stand on, is that for those, I mean, there are some that they go and they find out, unfortunately, school is not for them, but at least they had the opportunity. And that's something that we provide. When on an HBCU campus, one thing you will realize is that even though we're all Black, we're all very diverse. I'm not the same person from San Diego as somebody even from LA or the Bay Area. Definitely not the same person that was raised in the DMV area or the Midwest or even the South. And then on top of that, we have a very high population at most HBCUs, or at least a current or a existence of a population of African Americans. Well, they're technically African Americans, but Black people from outside of the US. So you also get that experience, and you'll have somebody from Barbados or you know, any of the islands, Hawaii, even though that's still California. My roommate was a softball player from Canada, and she was at Clark Atlanta. So you definitely find out that, you know, one of the things that are said is that, oh, there's no diversity at HBCU. There definitely is, because we're not all the same as Black people. But the experience was out of this world. Staff, faculty, they care about you. There was times that after missing a class, and I was one that I was always raised on making sure that you're in class, always had perfect attendance. My teacher one time showed up at my door in my dorm, wondering what was wrong. They're easygoing, office hours. They'll invite you over to your home. So of course, me coming from San Diego, I don't have the luxury of coming home. Well, I probably could have, but I really didn't want to. But coming home during Thanksgiving and some of the smaller holidays, and your faculty, sometimes even the president of the university, will open up their doors to you and say, hey, come be with our family. So you get that experience as well. To this day, and I am almost 12 years removed from my alma mater, I'm still very active with it. I currently sit on the board for our National Alumni Association. I currently, I get back financially. As I stated in the comments earlier, I also chaperone tours, and it's with a friend of mine's company. And one thing that we've been talking about, especially with everything surrounding Mikey Williams, is getting more athletes on our tours. And we do tours year round, spring, summer, and fall semester. And I've been trying now for the last 4 years, trying to get more students from San Diego, because we typically leave out of LA, since there's only usually, at most, I think I've had 4 kids from San Diego on one tour. So I've been really trying to get more of our students on these tours so that we can have a decent group and get these kids on the campuses beforehand so they can kind of understand and see what's going on there. And then hopefully that will help in their decision. One thing I say, obviously, you know, you can't be at HBCU playing football if there is no football program there. But one thing I also will say as far as academics is, before you get caught up on a Howard, a Clark Atlanta, a Hampton, a Langston, wherever, do kind of what I did in 7th grade and do research. So if you're interested in, let's say, marine biology, type that in with HBCU. That way you can get a list of the HBCUs that have that major, because at the end of the day, we would hope that our athletes are not just going there to play ball, and they're going to also get their degree. So I definitely suggest that as well. And not sure, oh, sorry, I should talk about that. So I also have a nonprofit here locally. It's the first and only nonprofit of HBCU advocacy. It's HBCU Alumni San Diego. And it's basically, we have about 350, maybe 400 alumni in the San Diego County area. Obviously with the military that fluctuates, so it's really hard to keep track, but the last running database that I had, it was probably about 340. That represents about 41 of the HBCUs, and there's about 102. So nearly half of the HBCUs are actually represented with alumni of all ages here in San Diego County. But we have an expo that we do every year. We've done it for 6 years now. Of course, with COVID, 2021 is looking, we don't know how it's looking right now, but we hosted and have been at the Jacob Center now for the past 3 years. We also in the summertime do a cookout at the park, and I actually just brought that. We used to do it at Admiral Baker Park, but we just brought it to Southeast. So it's over in Emerald Hills at the park. But it's basically a send-off where the alumni come together. We give words of wisdom. We done book grants. And the current students that come home for the summer, they're more than likely, to show up. But then it's more so, of course, for the freshmen, just to let them know that you have a family back here that understands what you're going through, because some of the students do get homesick. I was one of them for a little while, and then they kind of get over it, and then they don't want to come home. But we do that. We also do one in the spring, and it's usually just a mixer. We call it the Family and Friends, Alumni Family and Friends Mixer. And trying to think of what else did we do. Those are pretty much our 3 big programs that we do. We've been trying to get a mentoring group or program together so that the student can have a mentor, not only for academics and to keep them, alive and well, but also just like I said, it is a culture shock. So them having someone that knows the experience. So for me, when I go to Atlanta, which is a lot, I've actually, because of COVID, missed 4 trips. 2 were tours and 2 were directly affiliated with my alma mater and just our spring conference and a gala that we have every year. But I make it a point whenever I'm in Atlanta to check in on our San Diego students. If I recall, we have probably 7 at CAU, a good 5 or 6 at Morehouse, and as of graduation, I think maybe 2 or 3 at Spelman, maybe a little bit more than that. But I make it my point to check in on all of them. Take them out.
So Chantel, let me say that you're obviously a cheerleader for the HBCUs, a great advocate. You've had a great experience there. And before I let you go, I'm going to ask you a question. I want Derek to follow up on it. And then Liz is going to come in. She wanted to say something as well. But let me just ask you now, I think what Lonnie mentioned earlier, how he's trying to do more to get more engagement on his campus. And I think what you just outlined as an alumni from Clark Atlanta, coaches, you can do what she's doing right here in San Diego with your own programs. But I know a lot of parents, I know they want to send their kids to HBCUs, and the kids have never visited the campus. They want to send them to Howard where it snows and they've never seen snow. And, visiting campuses is real important too. But before you go, I just want you to answer this question. Was it a different level of Blackness on that campus at an HBCU? And then Derek, we're going to come right to you because you talk about the culture shock. Our kids in San Diego, are they all ready for that experience?
It's definitely a different experience of Black. Yes. And I say that because, again, when you speak to others, and sometimes, and I will say this, sometimes we have to be careful ourselves as Black people in what we say about HBCUs and how our students, athletes, etc., perceive HBCUs. Because sometimes there's this kind of inferior complex that we have, and that shouldn't be. But with the culture shock, I would say definitely, because again, I'm not the same person that is Black, raised in Chicago. I wouldn't change it for the world. I never had any bad experiences, but it can definitely be a culture shock. And like you said, even with the weather, some of the kids get down there like, I can't do this snow. I mean, when I was in Atlanta during a spring break, there was a tornado that hit the middle of downtown, and Clark Atlanta and the AUC, which is the Atlanta University Center, where people might not know if you've never been, but literally you can stand on the grass and be standing on Clark Atlanta's campus and Morehouse campus at the same time. And all of the dorms were out of power because of that tornado. So it's definitely a different level of Black. Yeah, I mean, I won't lie. People, they say, oh, you're from Cali, you're rich, you're this, you're that. So there's definitely, you get the different perceptions when you get there of what people think you are until they get to know you. But I've always been a Southern Belle at heart, so I think that's why I kind of fit in a little bit better, maybe. And I think that I probably own that to visiting my great grandparents every year in Louisiana as a kid. So,
Derek, how about you now?
I think it definitely is a different a different level of Blackness at the school. For me, it wasn't a culture shock because I have been to visit so many and had been traveling so much and seeing that. But if you had never been there before, I could definitely see it be a culture shock. What was wonderful to me was just what she was mentioning before, is that there is a level of personal care and that comes from the school about you as a student that I see there, that where she was mentioning how her professor came to her door. You know, if I had the same type of experience, you miss a class, they want to know why you're not there. You're not just a number, you are a student that they care about, I found. And I found the relationships that I made while I was there, I still have to this day. Anywhere, any city in this country I can go to, and I have friends there, that my friends that went to PWIs, they don't have the same experience in talking to them normally. Some do, but most of them don't. Now, I have, like I said, I have great friends that live almost every city in this country that I can go to anywhere, and I have somebody to call and hang out with. I have a network of people that I would not have had I not gone there. And I think it is the education is not subpar, which is what a lot of people, you know, might think going into, or have that false information. And that I have friends here who, at the time, I think it's just like Mikey bringing it up recently, I thought was awesome, because some of the kids, I don't think they even look at that as an option as before, where I had one of my really good friends when I was graduating who went on to play at San Diego State basketball. And, you know, he said, Derek, if one black school had offered me a scholarship, I would have gone. And I found that amazing that not one HBCU had not offered him an opportunity to come play when he had opportunities to play at 5 or 6 Pac-10 schools then, and ended up playing at State. So I just think it's a great option for people to have, and to definitely go visit, as she said before, going to understand what you're getting yourself into.
Now, Derek, did you have an option to go anywhere but HBCU? When you're from a family perspective now.
From a family perspective, I was highly pushed to go to an HBCU, but I wasn't made to go.
Right.
You know.
Okay, and now that you've gone and all those experiences, how do you relay that experience back here in San Diego? Are you doing anything to spread that knowledge, that wisdom, that experience with others here?
I try to as much as possible. So I went to Howard University, so I can let you coaches know, or anybody else that's on this call, if I could help or give any information to any of your students that are interested in Howard, or I can lead them in the right direction to people that are there now and other alumni that are here in town, I would gladly do that. And I try to push that all the time.
And I don't know how many coaches realize that you went to. Did any of the coaches on this call here tonight know that Derek's a basketball official? Did any of you know that and went to an HBCU? You see, so I think that's the value here as well. And I mean, there can be so much if people know who you are and what you've done and what your experiences are and your histories. And we appreciate both of you sharing that right now. Liz, you wanted to add something to this conversation. Can you unmute yourself? All right. And once again, if anyone else would like to speak, we've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay.
Put your name in the chat room. We'll get you on. Liz, take it away.
Okay. Yeah. First, there's 2 things. First, we had a young man that went to Hoover High School. My son was in when they were playing in 2000. He graduated, but he couldn't go. He couldn't accept. He was the quarterback, Jorge. He couldn't accept a scholarship to a state school or somewhere. So he had a college offer from Morgan State, and he was Hispanic, and he couldn't accept them because he was undocumented. But he went to Morgan State, did well there, played football, and now he's there coaching. So historical Black colleges and universities definitely welcome other ethnic groups to their schools, and they're in our communities, and they do recruit in sports.
Beautiful.
Right. So, and in regards to, and just reflecting back on what Jeff was saying about a solution, and from a solution-focused perspective, when someone call you or someone inquire and ask you about the makeup of your team, it's important that if you don't like what they're saying, speak a different language. The makeup of my team. Will I have so many, identify all the positions on the team by name as opposed to trying to identify it by playing this race game. And if they say, no, what is this, that? Say, no, excuse me. These are athletes. So it starts at the top to begin to change that language. And if, and they push the envelope. Well, no, how many brothers you got and how many Mexicans and this, no. These are athletes. This is a forward, this is a guard. Identifying with that and with numbers as opposed to trying to say if they're a different ethnic background, because we're going to continue to play this game and someone has to be a game changer. And I just encourage you to not continue to speak the same old language, but to begin to prescribe your own language. If you don't like something, they say, what are you talking about? Well, what are you talking about? So it begins with you as the change agent in making sure that if the language is the same and they expect for you to say something, do something different. Speak a different language, because communication is everything. And if we continue to engage them in that dialogue that is negative or demeaning and bringing out race for everything, we're not moving forward.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you. Appreciate that. And Liz, can you leave your contact information? In fact, everybody, if you can, leave your contact information in the chat room. Liz does cultural competency training for, world-class companies across the country, and so if any of you would like to get more information from her about what she's talked about tonight, I can't recommend her any more highly than what you've heard tonight. You just heard the tip of the iceberg. So she's got so much to offer anybody. And she's, if you didn't know her, she's been the founder and the head coach of the FloJo Track Club International, FloJo International. That's her sister, is FloJo. And so they both grew up in Watts, and she got a long story. Read the link that I put in the chat room about Liz, and her history is amazing, absolutely amazing. So Liz, we appreciate you being here. Okay, Andrea Bird, you finally showed up, but you didn't bring any athletes of all nights. We got Scott Giusti here tonight, and he's saying we need to have more athletes here. Andrea, what's going on?
Hey, sorry,
Okay.
I joined the call late today. But yeah, a lot of my athletes, they actually do want to come on. So I have like 3 or 4 more girls that are in the same program with Delina that actually want to come on. So I'll make sure I bring them next week.
Good. We appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so right now it's getting close to that closing time. We got about 10 minutes left. So if no one else has any closing comments, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, real quick, I don't know if Stanley on, I just saw him tag in. I don't know if y'all remember Stanley Daniels. Stanley grew up in Southeast. Stanley Bannon was a high-profile football player, played at Marian Catholic before it became Modern Day. Went on to play football up at UW. And, me and him been having conversations, and it was interesting to hear his conversation about, him growing up in Southeast and how that, you always thought sports would take him, because he went to the NFL, played at that level. And we was talking the other day, and he told me, he said he's seen it at that level, at every level, but he never really said nothing because he wanted to get to that, to that prize. Prize was the NFL. And that was interesting to for him as a young man coming out of Southeast to be able to say, I seen it. I was, some of my coaches did it to me, but I didn't want to say nothing because I didn't, I didn't want to lose a scholarship at UW. They told me just, tight the rope, you get to the league. Once he got to the league, he started figuring out how to be his own man. So I want Stanley, if you want, speak for about 5 minutes on, on your experience real quick before we shut it down.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, Jeff. And it's a pleasure to speak with you guys. But yeah, I mean, coming from Southeast San Diego, and seeing the being in that environment, to go to the University of Washington, where 40% of the school is white, the other 25% is is Asian, and then there's only a smaller representation of Black people or people of color in general. It was kind of culture shock, you know, because where I'm from in San Diego, you know, it's, you know, in Southeast San Diego specifically, you know, it's not something that I'm used to. But when you get to Washington, you see, you see it and you feel it real quick when you walk into those classrooms and you see those professors looking at you, and, you know, you see how they talk to you, how they treat you. It's opposite where, you know, people think we get treatment because we're ball players, you know, but not when you look like this, you know. And the coaches, you know, the coaches are the same way. Not all coaches, of course, but, you know, I definitely experienced it and felt it, where, you know, you kind of can tell if somebody doesn't really like you and you don't know why. But then again, you know, you do know why. And like kind of Jeff was saying, man, for me, it's something that I had to experience and kind of go through. You learn how to deal with it, like all, you know, like I said, unfortunately, like all the young guys of color learn how to go through. You know, and that you get to the league, and I was undrafted, so I couldn't walk in and talk in and, you know, beating my chest or whatever. I was undrafted. I had to, my first team meeting in the NFL, I had to sit on the ground. None of the guys would let me sit down in the chairs, right? The offensive line room wouldn't let me sit, right? Majority of them didn't look like me though, you know, and it is what it is. But, you know, I was just telling Jeff that, you know, you go through those things and you learn how to cope with it. There's, you know, there was nobody really speaking up how we're speaking up now about, you know, how wrong it is and addressing it. And I think that we're in just a very unique situation in history where, you know, you can't just be quiet anymore. There is no such thing as just, you know, being silent about it, you know, or noticing it but not saying anything. I told Jeff, you have to pick a side now. And now it's so blatantly obvious when you see somebody get murdered on the street that it's of course it's black and white, but really, like Jeff told me yesterday, it's really just right and wrong, right? Being able to decipher between what's right and what's wrong. And I think as coaches, a lot of you guys are coaches, educators, you know, brilliant people. I think it's important for you guys to, you know, make it clear your stance, to make it clear what's right, that you understand and acknowledge what's wrong, and then also teach your athletes, your students, how to navigate, how to communicate, how to express themselves, and then also, you know, a key with that is you have to let them express themselves and really understand how they're feeling, listen to how they're feeling, so that now you can steer these young people in the right direction. You know, we don't want our young kids of color thinking that they have to physically attack a white player or on the court in any other light than he would, you know, any other color player, simply because of what's going on in the world, right? That's counterproductive, right? So we really have to address that, man. You know, Jeff said it last night as well. I talked to him. You know, our youth is angry, you know, just like everybody else. But the scary part about it is our youth is not as educated as we are. They're not as mature as us, right? They need guidance, right? And coaches and educators, and, you know, it's your responsibility to do that. You know, without Jeff, without Ronnie, without Marshawn, right? I don't make it to college, right? I don't get to the league, right? And it's because from the age of 10 to, you know, 16, right? I had Jeff and Lonnie and Marshawn kind of guiding me, you know, helping me, you know, through my process of you know, growing into a young man. So, you know, even more so now, it's everyone's responsibility on this phone call, if you know, to step up and really take a stance, talk about it, listen to the kids, and help guide them and direct them in the right way. moving forward.
Great comment, Stanley. And I think what he just said, did you hear who we called out? Jeff, Lonnie, and Marshawn. That's who everybody is here today. Without you, Stanley, would you agree? You wouldn't be where you are today. You said it. We heard you say it. I know your family's been through the YMCA a long time as well, and you know, your younger siblings and your mother. I remember those days, and they were so proud of you playing at the next level. But there is responsibilities that we all do have. And man, we're so happy that you did come on tonight. Hope. Are you still in San Diego?
I'm in Seattle, Washington. I settled
Okay.
where I play ball at, but I get down there often. So, you know, not as often as I want to, but yeah, I get down there often.
Well, you can come back every Wednesday at 6 o'clock for everybody. These calls will continue every night at 6 o'clock on Wednesdays at 6 o'clock. So please come back, and we appreciate you. And Jeff, thank you for getting Stanley here tonight. You ready to wrap it up?
Yeah, again, like I said, I want to thank all y'all for coming out, and like Coach Bass said, me, like I said, I'm always learning. I think, and I ain't gonna lie. Most of y'all know me, man. I don't really hold my tongue too much, but I want to learn. I'm learning. You know what I'm saying? I know everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like Baz, me and Baz had a conversation, and again, it still sticks with me what he said on the phone. It was like, you know, Jeff, we all doing our own thing. You know what I'm saying? And we all making our stance, and you know what I'm saying, and sometimes, you know, we get frustrated, you know what I'm saying, you know, I know I do, you know what I'm saying, I know Coach Lonnie does, at schools like ours that, you know, we maybe don't feel we always get the right shake, or we get the negative stats from the news, from something that happens around the corner from Lincoln, to things that don't have nothing to do with our high school. So you know, at one time I was angry. I'm saying and I keep saying it, man. We've been here before, and like this time, you know, I'm not giving no passes. I told a trainer, talked to a trainer today, man, and I simply said, it's amazing that I've seen every video you have put up videos of all the kids that work out in your gym, all these athletes that work out in your gym. I haven't seen you take a stand on anything that happened in this world right now. And I'm like, it's amazing. You know what I'm saying? And then it goes back to exploitation of black athletes. Like, it's good to put you on your Instagram of, you know what I'm saying, Mikey Williams and all them dunking, but where's your stand? You know what I'm saying? What happens in your training if one of your kids says, hey, what do you think about what's going on in the world? And like me and Scott talked, you know what I'm saying, in Bass, it's the solution. I just want a solution. I really, you know what I'm saying, because we all got different opinions and different feelings, and everybody's not going to come to agree, you know what I'm saying? Like I told Stanley, man, I like talking to you guys, because to me, you're original people. You're ordinary people. When you start talking to people and higher ups that want you to pick sides of red and blue, and I don't really do well with those people. I do well with people who's just ordinary and that knows right from wrong. Murder is murder. Somebody gets murdered by the hands of somebody else is wrong. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not gonna sit back and debate it and always, and they was a criminal, and they shouldn't, they shouldn't have done that, or they flinched. You know what I'm saying? Still, it's murder. My brothers got killed. It was murder. That's wrong. So I want a solution. I want us just to find a solution where it may not, it may just be a small solution, but if I feel that we can come together and find a solution where our kids, our game is safe, and coaches, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, we can coach hard against each other, but we're knowing that at the end of the game, it's a game, and our kids know it's still a game, and our parents know it's a game, and the fans in the stands know it's a game, and the game has nothing to do with what's outside going on in the news. And you know what I'm saying? And that's the end game. For me, that's the end game. And like Scott said, we don't know when school will start, but I definitely want, Coach Bass send some information, and Mr. Bunker send information, and Mike Hott will send a solution, and Coach Huggins at Army Navy. So at least, you know what I'm saying, Ryan Meyer will send a solution. We're staying in touch with each other, and that's, to me, that's the greatest thing, because like I said, I'd rather talk to ordinary people like you guys than, you know what I'm saying, I don't talk politics. You know what I'm saying? They talk about gang violence, but you look at both sides, one's blue and one red. Ain't that gang related? So, but like I said, I appreciate y'all. Whatever solutions we have, you can we can email each other. Just trying to find a stand where we can make the game. I guess at the end of the night, let's make the game better. Like just keep it the game. You know what I'm saying? Without, you know what I'm saying? I don't want referees to had to be bombarded with, oh, that's racism. You made that call because you're racist. And I just want the game to play the game and the kids to have fun and play and compete, and whoever wins wins. And we keep what the kids. Like Mike Stud said, man. We got a good group, and he knows we're gonna get it done. So I appreciate everybody. That's it.
Jeff, thank you again. And for everybody here, we got close to 40 tonight. Can I ask everybody for next week, bring an athlete. Bring an athlete. Mike, you brought yours. It could be an alumni, whoever, but let's get more athletes here. And then, Scott, we hope you come back next week, too, so you can hear their voices. In the meantime, we'll be sure to send you the recording from the second session that we had, where you'll hear a lot of youth voices on that one. So we appreciate all of you being here. Same time, Wednesday at 6 o'clock next week. Jeff Harper Harris, we love you all. Thank you so much. God bless you. Have a great week.
Thanks, guys.
All right, now.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
See you next week.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Night, everyone. Let me see how do I do this.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night, everyone. Let me see.